Hi, Leonida. Thank you for joining me
Hi.
on my YouTube channel.
Hi, Julie. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Leonida is joining us from Nairobi, Kenya. She is doing a wonderful work in her country, mainly in the area of sustainability. So, Leonida, do you want to tell my viewers about your work and your journey?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Leonida Odongo. I come from Kenya, born in Kenya, of course, and raised in Kenya. My journey into activism and sustainability work started when I started working with young people, and I progressed to start to work with widowed women, and then most recently was working with rural women, specifically on food justice and issues around climate justice. I'm also working currently with university students on issues around shrinking civic space. Specifically, we focus on paralegalism, human rights education, and we also work around psychosocial support, because when you look at the negative impacts of COVID-19, it's something that nobody in the world was prepared for. And it has had very negative impacts, especially on young people. For example, parents are losing their jobs. Some had parents or relatives dying, and you also had like foreign students. The pandemic finds you in a foreign country. All the other students go back home, but you can't cross the borders because the borders are closed. So that's also what we've been doing in terms of psychosocial support. So engaging young people as well as women, specifically during Human Rights Day, different Human Rights Day, to have discussions around rights, discussions around social justice.
Yes, fantastic work. Fantastic work. So, Leonida, let's talk about the work you do with sustainability. Why did you choose to work in that area?
One, specifically focusing on food justice and climate justice. One, if you look at issues around climate justice, you find that, first of all, they're presented in a very scientific and technical way. So what I started to do was to make climate justice and climate change issues palatable to everyone, even a roadside vendor, a person living in informal settlement, a young person, child, to understand what is climate change and how is it impacting on us, and what is our role in terms of addressing the impact. But also recognizing the fact that if you look at climate change and you look at Africa as a continent, our cumulative contribution of all the 54 countries is just 4%. But you look at the impact are just too heavy. You've seen the cyclones in Mozambique, the tremors in the Rift Valley region. You've seen the floods, for example, and of course this is making people become internally displaced, and people are becoming climate refugees. We've had situations where indigenous people and pastoralists, the Maasai community, having to cross Kenyan border into Tanzania, and the cattle got confiscated when the late Tanzanian president said that Tanzania is not, grazing grounds for cattle to come from other countries, and people, pastoralists, had to pay a compensation. So when you talk about issues of sustainability, they're actually aspect of negative impacts of climate change, but of course the aspect that Africa contributes very little to the global emission, but the impact that we feel as a continent is quite high. And that's part of the reason why this became an area of interest for me as an individual. I felt that I can do something to avert the negative impacts, and that's why we do trainings and we hold dialogues on climate justice, but also looking at what solutions can we present. For example, if working with smallholder farmers, that's where we do agroecology. We train them on not using chemicals, because chemicals have an implication in terms of contributing to climate change and of course toxicity of the soil, and we still go ahead and consume the same food that we get from the toxic soil. So that's part of the reason why I got into this, but also looking at the access to information gaps that exist, because if you look at women and you look at youth, these are, you can call them disenfranchised, marginalized groups within not only in Africa but across the world. And that's why now I felt that there's a need to tap into this particular group that doesn't have access to information, or for rural women, you get bombarded with too much information that you can't even choose. And if you look, for example, at adverts that they put across for pesticides, they're always put in very attractive colors, and you find that many farmers have not gone to school, so it's always easy to lure them to, use pesticides. And in majority of the times, they don't have information in terms of even how to use them. Maybe it's written in English, maybe they don't speak English, they speak the local language. They don't even have like overalls and other protective gear, and some just use the chemicals directly. They don't even have like milk to drink after you've sprayed, which can go and protect your vital organs, for example, the respiratory organs. So those are some of the reasons why I felt that this was an area that I need to venture into, but of course also try to build a movement. Rural communities, a movement of rural communities who are conscious about food production, who are also conscious about what they grow, but also try to bring back the skills that we used to use in many years ago within the African context. For example, indigenous seeds, because African food production is being demonized, it's being looked at, inferior. But actually, people used to stay even 80 years, 90 years, but now people are dying at very, very tender ages, and they are dying because of non-communicable diseases, the pressures, the obesity, and you're having, because of eating over processed food, people are becoming obese. Like in Kenya, in Africa, we have Libya coming is a country with the largest number of obese people in the African continent, and this is partly because of eating the food they eat, but also because of a sedentary lifestyle.
I agree with you completely. I think it is need of the day, and especially the marginalized community needs this the most. So you're doing a fantastic work, but I'm sure you must have faced a lot of challenges during your journey. So do you want to talk about that?
Yes, one is that there's always an over expectation from the community. Like, for instance, you go to a farmer's community and you have like a dialogue around seed and seed sovereignty. So they expect like to have 30 farmers, all of them expect you to avail the seeds that have disappeared to them. And this becomes quite a challenge because sometimes you don't have those actual seeds. And that's why now we're pushing for seed libraries, where community-based seed libraries, and stock this with indigenous seeds so that farmers can actually have access to these seeds where they are. So they don't have to go to the agrovet. It's a measure of reducing the footprints of the farmer to the agrovet, because if I don't have money, the agrovet representative is not going to give me seeds for free. Yes. And of course, when you go to the agrovet, when you buy the seeds, you also have to buy chemicals, because these seeds cannot without chemicals. And the other thing is the geographical coverage. There's a lot of need to continue training, for example, the different constituents that I work with, the youth, the children, the women, the communities affected, the frontline communities affected by climate change, for example, those ones who live close to the oceans, the marine ecosystem communities, the fisherfolk. But then you find that sometimes you don't have adequate resources. You'd like, in an ideal situation, for example, in Kenya, we have 47 counties. If we had the finance and technical expertise, it would be great to cover the entire 47 counties. But unfortunately, as an organization, as Aki and Africa, we've only been able to work with just a small group in Nairobi County and Machakos County. So that actually leaves like 45 counties uncovered. But this information is still very much needed, because through our dialogues, we are creating agroecology champions within the communities, farmers who are able to train other farmers, but actually do the practice and share with other farmers. They set aside portions of their farm to be demonstration farms so that other farmers can come in and learn from them. And of course, when they're having their own forums, we call them barazas, they can actually share that information. Some are even taking the agroecology information to church. We're making use of invited spaces as well as invented spaces to create awareness. So for us, it's a matter is issues around resources, it's issues around geographic coverage, and of course the community expectations. Because if you go to a community, they expect you to be able to solve all those many problems, which maybe you may not have the capacity or the financial muscle to actually be able to address all of them. Yes.
Very true. And I think this is one of the major issues, because resources are very limited, and I understand there are so many NGOs from around the world are working, and this is the biggest challenge each and every one of them is facing, is a resource. But I'm sure that you will be able to replicate this, and you will be able to do wonderful work in the future. So any quick advice you want to add for people who are trying to do similar kind of work, in climate change and in sustainability?
What I want to say is, first of all, invest in the community. Like, for example, when we have our training sessions, first of all, we align, for instance, our food justice. We call them food justice tafakari. Tafakari is a Kiswahili word for reflection. We align this to the farmers' calendar because, like, farmers want to see solutions. Farming is not theoretical. They want to see the actual change immediately on their farm. So what we do is we align the training sessions to the farmers' calendar. For example, when they are tilling the land, that's where we have dialogues around soil. And we train them practically on issues, for example, composting and why it's important for you to have earthworms on your soil. We do soil testing, water retention capacity, how much water can your soil hold. We look at an assessment of the presence of microorganisms, for example, how much green matter do you have on your soil, how many earthworms can you count on a glass of on a glass of soil. And when we do this, the farmers actually go and practice this on their farm. And then when we come back for the second session, when you're talking about seeds, they share like what worked, what didn't work, what changes are they seeing. Then after we had discussions around soil, then we go to seeds, then we go to care for crops. That's where we talk about the dangers of pesticides on the soil, on the health. And then you also look at what alternatives, for example, because you can't talk to farmers, you can't tell them that pesticides are bad, but you're not giving them an alternative. Because if you leave them with no alternative, then it means they'll go back to the same pesticides that they've been using. And that's why we promote biopests, for example, using neem tree, mixing it with water and then spraying it can actually kill some pests. And then of course the neem tree itself is a repellent, so if you use it as a fence on your farm, it can actually repel some of the pests. And we also train them, for example, like which other repellents can they grow. For example, lemongrass, growing lemons, they have a pungent smell that can actually be a repellent, and it's working. We also talk about leguminous crops and their importance, and we have discussions around crop rotation as well as the dangers of monocropping, because like if you grow maize is a staple food for Kenyans and across many African countries. So there's need for a crop rotation, and we also have discussions in terms of why it's important to grow varieties of crops in terms of nutrition, but also trying to disrupt the cycle of pests and diseases. And another thing I'd like also to point out is that apart from investing within communities, but also building capacity is very important, because when as a development practitioner, you leave the community, they ought to be able to continue with whatever you took to them. So actually capacity building, having trainer sessions, but also respecting indigenous knowledge, because the assumption that to be scientific is to be modern, when actually part of science is actually what is killing us. And you're seeing the emergence of diseases, new diseases are coming up that were never there in the past, and things like wildfires are coming out because of the world is getting too hot. So those are some of the things that could work. And of course, we're talking about food production, also looking at investing in young people. If I can share from the African perspective, young people do not want to get dirty. Everybody wants to be a lawyer, everybody wants to be a banker, nobody wants to be a farmer. But then the sad part is that everybody actually consumes food every day. So the question is, where are you getting your food if you want to be a lawyer but you don't want to be a farmer? So those are some of the conversations that we have in terms of also looking at issues around nutrition, because when you talk about young people, they're influenced by adverts, they're influenced by friends, they're influenced by how much money they have. So we also hold forums, agroecology forums for young people, because if the farmers get old today and they die, or they get old and become frail, who's going to carry out agriculture in the future? That's why it's very important to young people to have an interest in food production. Yes. And of course, lastly, there's need to invest in women, because if you look at, for example, in my context within Africa, it's the women who are the seed savers, it's women who do the bulk of work in farming. So looking at empowering women and creating safe spaces for women to have discussions around food production, but also empowering them, for example, on marketing aspects, empowering them on technology, because they can also do e-marketing when you talk about food. So that's important. Yes.
Yeah, I think it is a great advice. So, Leonida, thank you so much. For the viewers, I have this two amazing playlists as part of my YouTube channel. One is Women of Substance and another one is Inspiring Women. Leonida is both, I must say. And I understand that you are busy, but you've given me this opportunity to interview you. So thank you so much for giving me time.
You're welcome. Yes. And I look forward to more conversations, similar conversations.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely, because I think your work is something I'm also doing locally in a small manner. So I'm sure that there is a lot to learn from you. If you guys are watching my channel for the first time and not subscribed to my channel, we have this amazing, inspiring women on this platform on a regular basis. So do subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much, Leonida.